The strategy of being granted the powers of certain offices, but crucially not the offices themselves, was a brilliant innovation. It meant that on a day to day basis, it appeared as if everything was business as usual in the Roman Republic. The people continued to elect officials as they had done for centuries, and those officials exercised power and seemed to run the government. Yet lurking behind this superficially republican system was Octavian, and if anything ever happened that he did not like, he could pop up and exercise one of his many powers to arrange matters to his satisfaction. However, the fact that he was not one of the official magistrates at any given time, and that he was not constantly seen to be wielding power, had the practical effect of lulling people into believing that he was not really in control. Octavian devised a remarkably clever solution, while actually being innovative, gave the appearance of simply following established traditions. He took on not just one name or title, but the plethora of them. Each of them didn't seem that intimidating or autocratic, but collectively bestowed unprecedented status and prestige upon him. Additionally, all of these names or titles either had Republican precedents or were based on long-standing cultural concepts, so that it seemed that Octavian was being respectful of tradition. Even in his version, these same terms took on additional or novel meanings. One of the most interesting of these was the title of Augustus, bestowed upon Octavian by vote of the Senate after his supposed abdication of power in 27 BC. The fourth and final component of his successful solution to the challenge of how to rule Rome as one man centered around his personal behavior. In this realm, he was clearly thinking of the animosity that Julius Caesar had provoked by his arrogant and autocratic manner, so Augustus made a great show of trying to demonstrate his modesty. Rather than living in a lavish palace, instead he inhabited a house of modest size. Likewise, he dressed in a simple toga like every other citizen, dined on ostentatiously simple foods, and treated senators with respect and courtesy instead of lording over them. Content with possessing real power, he apparently did not feel the need for luxuriating its superficial trappings. Augustus' calculatedly unpretentious behavior helped sustain the fiction that he was not, in fact, an absolute monarch, and it worked. Whereas Julius Caesar had been assassinated after only a few years, Augustus enjoyed a long reign of almost half a century, and ultimately died of natural causes. Augustus' reign was marked by many spectacular achievements, and he became the inspiration and model for subsequent leaders. However, there were one major flaw in his settlement of the empire: the issue of succession. Because there was no official position of emperor, there was nothing concrete to transfer to the next person. There was also the vexing problem of how to select the best qualified person. For better or worse, and many times during the next century, it would be for the worse. Augustus settled on the principle of heredity. The next emperor would be the nearest male blood relative of Augustus. Augustus' choice of heredity as the mechanism for succession was somewhat curious in what he actually had no close male relatives. He had no sons from any of his three marriages, nor did he have any brothers. What he had to work with were three women: his sister, Octavia, his daughter, Julia, and his third wife, Livia. Augustus looked first to his sister Octavia, who had a very promising teenage son named Marsilius. To solidify Marsilius as his heir, Augustus forced his 14-year-old daughter, Julia, to marry Marsilius in 25 BC. Augustus then began grooming Marsilius to take over, appointing him to a number of government posts so that he would gain experience and respect as a leader. Marsilius was bright and popular, but 2 years later, he caught an illness and unexpectedly died when he was just 19 years old. Augustus next focused his attention on his loyal friend and general named Agrippa, who had played such a key role in Augustus' rise to power and who had effectively been serving as his second in command. Agrippa, or Augustus' loyal friend and general, unexpectedly died in 12 BC. Agrippa and Julia had two sons, Gaius and Lucius. The union of Agrippa and Julia had produced two sons, Gaius and Lucius. Augustus was very fond of these grandsons and pushed the Senate to grant them extraordinary honors. The Roman Empire from Augustus to the fall of Rome to make the succession even clearer. Augustus adopted Gaius and Lucius as his sons. Despite their privileged upbringing, both the boys seemed stable and promising. But in 82, Lucius fell ill and died at the age of 19. Just 18 months later, his brother Gaius was wounded in a skirmish in Armenia and died in 84 at the age of 23 years old. All of Augustus' attempts to find an heir so far had focused on his family, the Julian family. But now he had simply run out of close male relatives. The only remaining male even remotely connected to Augustus was his wife Livia's son from a previous marriage, Tiberius Claudius Nero. After the death of Agrippa, Augustus had forced Tiberius to divorce a wife that he loved in order to marry the widow Julia. Augustus had never liked Tiberius very much, but Augustus now had little choice but to adopt Tiberius as his son and promote him as heir to the throne. Emperor Tiberius. Augustus surprised everybody by living a very long time. He finally died in AD 14 of natural causes at the age of 77. At the time of Augustus' demise, Tiberius was already 54 years old. Though soldiers were compelled to swear an oath of loyalty to the new emperor, various resentments had been rebuilding in the army. With his dour personality, Tiberius was ill suited to win over the troops, so he sent his brother's charismatic son, Germanicus, to soothe the legions, and he did, calming the revel. Considering his relatively advanced age, Tiberius had to quickly pick a successor, and Germanicus would have made a logical, popular, and reasonably skilled heir. Unfortunately, Germanicus fell ill and died in AD 19. Tiberius did have a son, Drusus. Although not as popular as Germanicus had been, Drusus was an experienced leader and now became the heir apparent. Already under Tiberius, the prefect or commander of the Praetorian Guard, named Sejanus, began to exceed his jurisdiction and assume control over much of the government. The very ambitious Sejanus was maneuvering to position himself as potential heir to the emperor. This goal became attainable when AD 323, Drusus suddenly fell ill and died when he was only 36 years old. The convening Sejanus began an affair with Drusus' widow and sought permission from Tiberius to marry her, a move that would have made him a blood relative to Tiberius and thus a legitimate candidate for the throne. Tiberius denied this request but continued to allow Sejanus to exercise considerable power so that Sejanus often effectively ruled on Tiberius' behalf. In AD 26, Tiberius left Rome for good and retreated to his pleasure villa located in the island of Capri. Although Sejanus was working hard to set himself up to succeed Tiberius Germanicus' widow, Agrippina was actively campaigning to promote her son by the popular deceased general as Tiberius' heir. This was a boy named Gaius Julius Caesar Germanicus, widely known as Caligula.